Hi there folks, in today's demonstration I'm going to show you how I built a Power App to dynamically populate strings within a paragraph of text. So these paragraphs have placeholders. I'm using pipe-delimited characters in order to indicate where those parameters are due to go, and I'm going to show you both an example but also how to build it from scratch so that you can dynamically populate your own properties into paragraphs of text using a Power App. This is perfect for populating Word documents, but also may be very useful for generating prompts for your GPT models. So as always, I'll encourage you to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's jump into the demonstration. So I'm going to kick things off from my Canvas app, and I'm going to show you a very basic example that I've built, and then afterwards I'll show you how to actually build this with a more complex example using a SharePoint list as a data source and several paragraphs. So what you're seeing on screen right now is a screen that contains a paragraph of text. We have a couple of input parameters based on the cost and the dimensions, and you'll notice that both of those are encapsulated in pipes, and that's what helps us to identify those parameters dynamically. Beneath that, I have a gallery, and in that gallery we have a couple of text input controls. Those are also generated dynamically based on anything that is pipe encapsulated. So if we want to have multiple parameters, we want to enable folk to be able to provide some data to then populate that paragraph of text, we can do that dynamically. And one thing that springs to mind, as well as being able to use this to generate Word documents, for instance, or paragraphs of text, it might actually be quite useful for building out prompts. So if you're using prompts as a concept for ChatGPT, you might want to parameterize those prompts, and by using this technique you can actually make the input properties for that prompt totally dynamic using the method that I'm now demonstrating on screen. So what happens now, if I go to play, I have the ability to insert a cost, and we'll go with a price of $19.99, and we can have some dimensions, so 10 by 20 by 40, and if I hit the populate button, what you'll see below is that paragraph of text populated now with those input parameters. And you'll note that the price is actually referenced twice, and the reason I mention that is later on you'll see some important code that I've inserted so that we only get the ability to provide the cost once, despite it being referenced twice in the paragraph of text above. Now if we want to extend this and add in a new parameter, I can pop open the text here and we can maybe insert the product name. I'll type in called and then product name, but I'll encapsulate product name in pipes. So we'll just go and wrap product name in pipes. And if I just collapse that and look back at our app, you can now see I have a new input control for the product name. So like I mentioned at the beginning, this is completely dynamic. Based on the number of properties that you have encapsulated in the double pipes, this gallery will update to then provide you some input controls for those values. So if I play the app once more and give our product a name, and we can go with the GPT headset 2000, the cost is going to be £2,000, and in fact I'll put a pound sign at the beginning there, and the dimensions are going to be 20 by 50 by 200, massive, and we'll hit populate, and you'll see here we have, as expected, a new paragraph of text called the GPT headset 2000 with the price at £2,000, both here in the middle of the text but also at the bottom, and then our dimensions in the placeholder there for dimensions. So how do we build this? So back into Edit, the first thing to call out really is the data source for the items of our gallery. So you can see I have a gallery here. It has two controls. One is a text input and one is a label. So the label is based on the tag. The text input, of course, is based on the text that we need to supply for that label. But the items is based on a regular expression. And so this regular expression is looking for anything that is pipe encapsulated. And by using that regular expression, we can obviously then identify all those parameters within that paragraph. Now, in order to explain how this works, the first thing I'm going to do is to highlight this match all expression. And you'll see that the output is a table. And if I pop that open, again, we can see those properties or parameters. So product name, cost, dimensions, and cost. And we can see already that cost appears twice, and that's because in the original paragraph of text, that property appears twice. So hence why I have the expression distinct wrapped around this whole expression, and based the distinct is based on the full match column. So it will now return me a table of values that are distinct, and we can see already that cost has been removed. So that's what enables me to create this dynamic gallery that has just those three properties despite cost appearing twice in the paragraph of text above. And of course you can change this to reflect your situation. You might want to have cost appearing more than once. Equally, you might just want it to appear once but to populate twice throughout that paragraph that we have. So with that in place, we have our gallery, we have our distinct values, which is based on the properties. It's completely dynamic. We saw that when we added product name, it added that in. If we now go and have a look at the label tag, we have an expression which is substitute based on the value, and we're looking to substitute all the pipes with nothing. And that's purely just to tidy things up, and it'll make things a lot easier in the next part of the process. In the text input, I have a very basic text input, no changes. We're simply looking to get the values from the end user to enable us to populate that string. And it's at this point that I was thinking about how else this could be used. Not only is it useful for populating paragraphs of text in Word documents, for instance, if you're building out a GPT model and you have a prompt and you're looking to parameterize that prompt, if you use the following technique that I'm demonstrating on screen, you could actually parameterize all your prompts and, of course, grab all those input properties dynamically using this gallery method that I'm demonstrating. Anyway, back onto the demonstration, we can see that we have a paragraph of text and it's just a concatenation of a collection. The real magic is all happening in this populate button. So if I pop open the expression editor, we can see the series of expressions I have. The first of which is purely setting a variable to the original text control that contains the paragraph of text. And I've broken it down like this to hopefully explain how it all works. Potentially you can nest a lot of this, but the first expression, as we see, if I double click on it, contains that original paragraph of text that has the input parameters encapsulated in those pipes. In the second expression, I'm updating another variable or setting a variable based on a split, and that is splitting out our text string based on the pipes, the double pipes. And what that will give us is a table of text. So if I pop that open now, we can see we have the value column here, and things like product name and cost will jump out at us right now. And then the other stuff, the other sentences, etc., are in separate lines or separate values in the table. And what we're going to do in the next part of this expression is to loop through all of these different rows in this table and look for any of the values that match the properties that we have. So cost and dimensions are, to me and you, very obvious that those are properties. If they match, we can go and replace them with the text that we provided in the text input. If they don't match, we'll simply keep the original text. And that is what happens in the next part of our expression here. So I have a very basic expression just to quickly clear my collection of strings, and then I have a for all, and that for all is going through that whole table of text that we just saw on the screen there. You'll notice that I've called out the individual values as text strings just to make it easy for me to identify, and then I'm collecting each of the results into a new collection using what's called coalesce and a lookup and a default value. So let's try and have a look at this bit here and understand what's going on. So we're looping through, of course, all the different values that are in the table, and what coalesce does is it returns the first non-null value. And we have two expressions within that coalesce. We have a lookup, and we're looking up all of those items in our gallery to see if the text matches the text in our table. So if the text equals, for instance, cost, then we know we've got a match, and we can return the text gallery substitute text. So if we look at the gallery on the left hand side here in the tree view, you can see I have that control called text gallery substitute. So if we get a match in the lookup in the items where the text is equal to the value that's in that table of strings, then we return the substitute text which we provided in those input controls. If we don't get a match, then we just return the original text, which is the text string.value. Now this is where coalesce comes into play. Coalesce will return the first non-null value. So if we do a lookup, we don't get a match, we don't get a text string, it returns null, therefore we keep the original text. And so what happens is, if we just go and have a look again at that table, we pop it open, our for all is going through all these different values. Is there anything in our gallery that matches introducing our incredible new, etc., etc.? No, there isn't. Therefore, keep the text string value. Is there anything for product name? Yes, there is. We do a lookup, we get a match, we therefore get the text, and we can return that and replace the product name with the value that's contained within that text gallery substitute control. And we work through them one by one in that loop, looking at cost, looking at dimensions, and then of course skipping any that are strings that we don't have a match. And then ultimately, when we get down to our text input control with the text, remember we had that concatenation, which will just bring back together all of these values. Now, if I just go and double click on the collection string, we can see that collection string is exactly the same format. It has all of those values in a table, but where we previously had those parameters, because we've had those matches, we've used those lookups, the coalesce, we now have those text strings replace GPT headset 2000, the £2,000 and the dimensions. And if we were to jump back here onto the text control, we can see that all we've done is concatenate that original table, which we can see here, based on the column called result. And that just purely brings back together all of those text strings that have been broken down into a table by using split based on those pipe delimiters, and then we've rejoined them back together again once we've substituted out those values. So let's now see if we can build this ourselves from scratch. And to make things interesting, what I have is a Microsoft list with 3 different paragraphs, and you can see those paragraphs have parameters based on date, buyer's name, etc. We're going to bring this into our Power App. We're going to generate some dynamic input parameters and populate them and see how we can build that from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is just add in a brand new screen. We've got that there. And then I've already connected up my data source, my paragraphs with parameters that we just saw. And what I'd like to do is to insert a new text control or have a text label, and we can bring in those paragraphs. So the data source for those paragraphs are paragraphs with parameters. So paragraphs with parameters. There are several of them, so we will concatenate them using concat. And the concatenation is based on the paragraph text column that we have. And what I'd like to do is also put in a couple of return lines. So I'll just show you what happens if I just close that off. It'll bring in all my paragraphs like so, which looks a bit messy on screen. But what I'd like to do is just to insert a couple of return lines so it appears nicely on screen like so. So we have our paragraphs of text on screen. Remember, this could be a prompt, etc. that you're using. We can quite clearly see all those parameters. And at the moment, we've got no way of doing anything with that text, but we're going to build out the same as we saw previously. So I need to insert a gallery because, of course, we need the gallery to display those input values. We'll go with a vertical gallery. I'll just move it to the side here. And so if I go and just simplify it, make it blank, so there are no controls, and then we need to sort out our data source. So the data source is based on that expression. Remember, it's based on match all initially, so we can type in match all. It's based on the content of this text here. So if I go and have a look at my tree view, I've got label 5. So if I type in label 5.text, that'll get me all the text. And then I need to insert my regular expression, so in quotes like so. And don't ask me exactly how these regular expressions work, because I have to admit, good old ChatGPT helped me on this one. But we'll put in, as expected, this will actually search for any strings within those pipes. You might want to specify that the strings only contain letters, for instance, in order to keep them unique. But let's just go with what I've generated. And here we go, the last bit of pipes here, and close it off. And if I just go ahead and highlight that, we can see that already we're generating a table of data based on those properties in those 3 paragraphs. Now remember, I want these to be distinct, so I'm going to wrap this whole expression here in the word distinct. We'll go with that, opening and close brackets, but it also needs to include the name of the column. What are we looking to get distinct values from? So full match. And now we have those distinct values. And if we jump back onto our gallery, go into edit, I want to insert two controls. First, a text label, and then a text input. If we line them up nicely, and maybe resize this as well. In fact, let's shift this all up and try and get as much on here as possible. There we go. Now you'll note that these properties or parameters have come through with the pipes, and before what I used was the replace or substitute, in fact I think it was. So go with substitute, and we're looking to substitute all instances of pipes with nothing. And this is where jumping between Power Apps and Power Automate often catches me out. So it's double quotes that we need here. There we go. So that's now working. We have our text input. If you're really fussy, you can remove the default values. So we've not got any text in the text input like so. So I'll just do a bit of tidying up and rename some of these things. So this is the label with the paragraphs of text. This is our gallery of properties, of which we have a text for our property values, and we've got our label for our properties. And with that all nicely updated, if we go and insert a button, we can then go and replace all of those properties within our paragraphs that we have on screen. So the first thing that I did was, we'll call this button replace value, was to create a variable, and the variable is to store the paragraph of text. So I'm going to call this global para text, and in there I'll insert the value from our label of paragraph text. So label paragraphs of text dot text. Now last time round I actually then run a second query or a second expression to split that, but I'll do that all within the one action, and we will also include split on that, and we will split on the double pipes. So that will now give us our table based on all of those individual strings, and let's run that and just see what happens. So I'll just hold my alt, press the button, and if we have a look at the content now, we should be able to see how it is split. And because we have variables right at the beginning, on such and such a date, such and such buyer's name, I'm thrilled to officially start at blah 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 property address, so we can see all these properties coming through. It's obvious to us, and of course we're going to populate these based on the text that are supplied within these text inputs. With that now in place, I can put a semicolon, and we'll just open up this expression bar here, and we can then look at replacing them. Next, we want to create a collection, and I'm going to use clear collect, and that collection is going to be used to store our new strings. So I'll call it call of strings. I've already got call strings, so I'll call it call strings, and I'm going to set that to blank, and there we go. We can put a semicolon at the end. Now it's all about looping, so we want to go through every single string and see, have we got a match in our gallery? If we do, get the value. If we don't, use the existing string. So for all of our global para text, which is our table of the split strings, and I'm going to call this as text strings, so it's easy to refer to in our expressions. What I want to do now is I want to do a collect, and I can see the autocomplete is getting in the way here. So I want to do a collect, and that collect is going to be in that new collection that I've just created, which is called call strings. And what we want to collect is a nice little object. Again, the autocomplete is getting in the way, so I'll delete that, put in an opening squiggly bracket, and I want to get the value, and that particular value is going to be based on a coalesce. So a coalesce, like I mentioned earlier, is going to return the first non-null value. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a lookup, and that lookup is going to be based on the gallery that we've got. We're going to have a look at the gallery, which I've called gallery properties. We're going to look at all items, and we're going to see if the label of the properties dot text is equal to the text string. So remember, I've renamed or referenced each of the values in our global paratext as text strings dot value exist, and if it does exist, we want to get back the text property values dot text. So if there's a match and we look up that gallery of properties, if there's a match on the string, we get back the text property value, which is our text input, and then we swap that out. If it doesn't exist, then we have the fallback property, which is the text string dot value. And we can put the closing bracket there, and we can finish that off with a curly bracket, which gives us our object or our record. And then finally, I can close it off with two closing brackets, and we have our completed expression. So if I format that text, we can see what it looks like. We initially set our global variable. We're splitting on those pipes, which gives us our table of all those strings. We create a blank collection, and then for all of the strings in that table of text, we're basically looking up our gallery to see if the string matches the string in our original table of text. If it does, we can return the appropriate value from the text input property values. If it doesn't, we fall back onto the original text string value by using coalesce, which will return the first non-null value. So if we close that and give that a go, I am going to have to go and supply some dates, etc. So I'm going to put in today's date, the 17th of February 2024. The buyer's name, we can say it was myself. Property address was a house in Scotland. Agent's name is Jack Smith. Purchase price will go for 200,000. Payment method, we'll say cash. Closing date is in fact the 18th, so it's tomorrow. And we can continue through the last few properties. So the seller's name can be Jim McDonald. Party responsible, no idea what that is, but we'll put in me. And the deposit amount we can say was 20,000. And if I hit the button, whilst we won't see the text update, what we can have a look at is if we go and click on that button and open up our expression bar again, I can go and pop open the collection and have a look at that table. And we can see now the date, 17th the 2nd, my name, etc. has been placed into these placeholders that I have in these individual values within this table. And if I want to turn that into a brand new string, I just need to do a concatenation. So for the sake of any argument, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new screen. I'm going to insert a text label. I can make that full screen here. And all we need to do is insert that concat instruction. We'll use our collection of strings this time, and we will join on the value. And that should give us our populated text there. We can see on the 17th of February 24, Damien, I am thrilled to start the journey of purchasing my new home at a house in Scotland, etc. And we can see where it's populated my name again and Jim McDonald, and inserted all of the other dynamic values. Now, of course, if you're looking to get this into a Word document, I do have an example of dynamic documents using a Microsoft form, and I actually do the population of all the strings using Power Automate. But in this particular scenario, I'm populating all those dynamic properties within Power Apps. So you could now send this directly to populate a Word document. You could pass this whole string to Power Automate and save it within a data source somewhere, or save it within a Word document or into an email, for instance. And like I mentioned earlier on, this would work extremely well if you're using prompts for GPT. So hopefully I've given you some inspiration, some ideas, shown you some techniques with some of those expressions in Power Apps. I'd love to hear in the comments below how you've used this yourself, what you've learnt. And if you haven't already, please make sure you like and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye.